Americans, we love them, they don't know we exist. You know the meme, Americans couldn't locate another country if their lives depended on it.
About Aleppo. And what is Aleppo?
The rest of the world is left to wonder what the hell are they doing so wrong over there that not even their elected officials know the first thing about countries they decide to bomb.
How many people live in Iran, by the way?
I don't know the population.
At all?
No, I don't know the population.
You don't know the population of the country you seek to topple?
And yet they all have this deeply confident aura about them. But how did it become like this? Is the world just profoundly unlucky in seeing total dipshits trying to orient themselves in the world? And is there some secret majority of Americans who actually have some knowledge about the world? Well, no. Americans are that bad at geography. But why? I will tell you about how bad the problem is and what changes were made over the decades that led to where we are now. I'm not going to suggest any improvements, plenty suggestions exist out there already. We are just exploring here, which the Americans should do more of. First of all, our knowledge about how bad the problem actually is very limited. The surveys finding out the level of geographical knowledge only take place every few years, and the last one, done by National Assessment of Educational Progress, was in 2018, and the questions are disappointing to say the least. A few example questions are available on their website. Want to play along? Question 1. Where is the biggest temperature variation? In other words, can you read the word temperature and can you point to the biggest bump? And yet, still only 43% of people answered this one correctly. Question 2. This image shows the expansion of Beijing. Give one positive effect and one negative effect that this could have on the population. Positive, I honestly don't know of any. Negative, pollution, I guess. What is the correct answer, you say? Pollution, we got that one correctly. More jobs, better economy. You can't know that. How many people answered correctly? 8%. Honestly, with these results, I would start to question the questions themselves. Let's do one more question. What do the dress and method of transport of the person in the photograph tell about the climate in which he lives? If you're thinking, what the same? Want to know what the answer is? A complete response is a response that indicates that the climate is hot, dry, and windy. In windy. And the answer is not accepted as complete unless you write windy. And since American education is anything but centralized, there are enormous differences in the test results. School funding and your identity are moderately good predictors of your test results. What is interesting in this study is that the trends in how non-white kids were performing seem to flip towards worse in 2010. It is tempting to think this is just part of an education of an empire. It would make sense, every country has a propaganda machine one way or another, but this approach would be very creative if it was intentional. North Koreans be like, we are the best in the world. Americans, what world? Believe it or not, American education wasn't always terrible. I know, I couldn't believe it either. A notable geography book from 1792 by Jedediah Morse, yes, his son invented the Morse code, is a great example of how they used to make pretty decent geography books. And although they had an imperial tone to them, they were not bad, and their attitude toward American exceptionalism seems pretty timid. Let them have a bit of ideology as a treat. With the end of the 19th century, reform slowly crept in. These reformers asked themselves a crucial question: why should people know anything? You may answer it is because since we are alive, we have a duty to know more about the world, or to be able to LARP as medieval scholars at parties, or to try and manifest the notion that we are the universe discovering itself. And some people would answer, I will only know what concerns me and what is related to my experience. That's not how this should work. How can you presume what people want to know if they don't even know what they don't know? And the rest of the world obviously thinks this is wrong as well, otherwise everyone would be doing American education by now. The reforms shifted the focus from the traditional formal knowledge onto the child, how it feels and whether it feels safe. They began reframing everything toward how something concerns an individual and what their likely predispositions are.
What is my purpose?
You pass butter.
Oh my god.
I think this laid the groundwork for American main character syndrome. If you are taught to always think about how something is relevant or irrelevant to you because that is how the entire educational system was structured, you internalize this as a mode of thinking. To find out how it all happened, we have to go back to 1912 specifically. First, I don't believe you have been acquainted. Let me introduce you to John Dewey. He was a philosopher and a psychologist, thanks to whom, among other people, education now began producing people who think absurd shit like Africa is a country in Asia, and crucially, no one cares now. Kids need to learn by experience, feel good during, and mostly only engage in what is relevant to them. Facts are now thought to be elitist. Let's not burden the child. Dewey didn't do this on purpose, he was just an idealistic thinker, as they all are. He argued that society needs engaged, responsible citizenry. That is what education is for. I still don't agree that that is the correct outlook on how education shapes citizens, but fair enough. But combine that with general human incompetence in implementing his ideas, and you get yourself basically annihilation and chaos. This was the progressive reform of American education. So in 1912, a committee was formed with the purpose of reorganization of secondary education. American society was rapidly changing back then, with tons of new migrants coming in and industrialization at full speed. Someone had to do something, because schools were only for the elites back then, and that could not be the case any longer. 4 years later, this commission published a report called Social Studies in Secondary Education, and they proposed changes that were meant to, in theory, create an informed citizenry with a lot of cohesion. I have to point out one thing now so you can keep track of how they did not consider one other potential outcome of education, and that is whether education should produce scholars. The answer was now no. Most people will not become scholars, so we shall stop trying. While it's not explicitly stated in the Cardinal Principles of Secondary Education from 1918, you can see that their approach is now very utilitarian. Prepare the kid for a job, and that's that. So if you're not actively curious or don't have supportive parents, congrats, that's all you're gonna get, if you're lucky. Pause the video if you want to read through the summary. These principles set the direction in which education was headed. Also, what I think is interesting, they specifically state that they want Americans to feel responsible for their country. Well, that was great success, but Americans, this is an intervention. You do not have to feel personally responsible for what is happening in your country. Reasonable people are able to tell the difference between a citizen and their government. And nobody actually thinks that a citizen can influence their government. And you'll get there eventually too. End of intervention. In 1921, another bureaucratic behemoth, this time called National Council for Social Studies (NCSS), was formed, with the aim to advance the framework of new social studies. That was not the final respite for geography, the final stage of hell. No, death wasn't good enough. It needed to properly vanish. In 1957, Sputnik was launched in the Soviet Union, and Americans felt motivated to do something about it. So a year later, in 1958, the National Defense Education Act was passed. Math? Important. Geography? Not so much. Aside from geography, notice how such legislative decisions could gradually make people think that useful professions, like vocational trades, aren't vital. Some people would, in fact, trace the beginning of the decline in the social standing of vocational trades to this particular event. In 1963, new curriculum of social studies called MAN, a course of study, was now being used. And geography was reduced to what essentially now amounted to doing literature analysis on reality. Imagine why these people are like this and write about it. I don't know if this needs to be said, but I'm going to say it anyway. That's not geography at this point. That's creative writing. And because lack of geographical knowledge isn't immediately obvious or even a pressing issue even when you do notice, not even the 1983 report, A Nation at Risk, mentions geography as something worthy of reintroducing to the general population as a standalone subject. And where is geography now? Basically dead. Yeah, it's dead. Millions of years of humanoids looking up at the sky and wondering, what am I? What is my purpose and place in the universe? How does this all work? Only for pragmatists to come out and say, you look like your potential is to pass butter, so you pass butter. And as the central theme of America goes, if you're poor, you're doubly f***ed. You'll be happy if you come out on the other end literate. And encountering difficult things at school could teach people a little humility when they would see what humans have accomplished and what our potential is as a species. And crucially, everyone gets exposed to the same material and their civic identity is formed better and clearer. I can't imagine the chaos that would ensue if, for example, China tried implementing American education, or any country, really. And geography isn't just names of places, so what has geography ever done for us? Geography develops spatial reasoning and visualization skills, which visual spatial intelligence is a whole separate area of intelligence. That in turn enhances broader cognition and verbal reasoning skills. They may have had better success with that National Defense Education Act if they didn't scrap geography back then. Kids that are given good geographical education outperform peers in mental rotation, spatial visualization, and spatial reasoning tasks. When students are given just training over a semester, their navigational skills and mental rotation abilities improve. There is a philosophy there somewhere that I would probably hate on principle, because philosophy that says that knowing where things are and what their name is not just trivia, it makes them real. Naming things makes them real, and I think we have a duty to remember at least something. Imagine there was an apocalypse and only a handful of people survived, and they had to reconstruct human knowledge only from their memory. Now imagine all of these people were American. History would be whacked. I know, a generic human from wherever is very, not smart. But then you could ask, why should Americans know anything at all? I think there is an argument to be made that they have a greater responsibility to know about the world as the world policemen or citizens of the current empire. For how long, huh? Their votes matter more than those of someone from a random, small, largely irrelevant country, but I think they still should not blame themselves if things don't work out. What do I end this with? Is American education going to improve? Nah.